Let's go do this podcast. What's going on, Star Wars fans?
Hello there.
We are here with a new episode. We have a new guest on here tonight, Mr. Matt McQuiston. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Nick and Matt work together at Klug Fitness. They're both personal trainers, and we're going to talk a little bit about Matt sort of getting into Star Wars. He's seen a few things, and we're going to talk about some of those things. He's going to ask us some questions about some of the Star Wars lore, about some of the things that are going on with Star Wars now, and some of the things that have happened before this episode. Let's go ahead and get started, Matt. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen and what's going on in your Star Wars world.
So my Star Wars world is really, the pop culture. I know I've seen the original three, and I know kind of the basic storyline, but I feel like it's gotten so big that it's become overwhelming to me, and I don't know if I want to watch the movies again. I don't know where to go, like where to start, what order. There's just so much. It's gotten so big. So it's something that I'd love to get back into, but I just need a little direction.
Yeah, and there really is. There's so much coming out, as Nick and I have talked about on these podcasts and stuff, and talked about other people with the animation and the new live action that Disney Plus has continued to put out. And, the movies they're in the works for new movies and stuff as well, which is pretty cool. So we're excited about that stuff for sure. But all this new stuff I think is great as well. The Acolyte, we are really enjoying the Acolyte. I know that. And
tonight, tonight, episode 6.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Matt and I were talking one day. We were at Topgolf, and we were talking about the podcast. And I said, "Hey, you want to watch podcasts?" And he's like, "I would, but I don't know what you guys are talking about." And which is kind of a common thing with people trying to get into Star Wars. There's just so much. My buddy Logan, who you guys have both met, was the same way. He just wouldn't watch it with me. He said, "I don't know what's going on. Don't know where we are." So it was Matt's idea to do a little Star Wars for beginners crash course, and also some frequently asked questions. Matt has some excellent questions coming up.
Yeah.
So we're pretty excited to have it.
Yeah, it's again, it's so cool that you're still interested in it, because a lot, there's so much stuff going on, and like you talk about pop culture, you see it in, and we've talked about this before, you see it in The Big Bang Theory, you see it in all these other shows that are coming out, whether it's a reference to Darth Vader or maybe it's a one-liner or different things like that. So, I mean, everybody knows what Star Wars is, but again, some people have gotten into it like we have, and some people are like yourself, and some people haven't even seen it and don't care to. And that's okay with us. We're not judging anybody. It's something that we enjoy, and it's our opinion. Most of the time that's what this stuff is. It's our opinion, on how we like it or not like it, or what's coming out. I know there's a lot of hate right now for some of the stuff coming out, but we don't touch on that here. We enjoy it all. It's a cool story for us to continue to immerse ourselves in. Start with a couple questions, and then and we'll proceed from there, and then we'll talk about, I know we wanted to talk about maybe like how to watch everything, whether it's going to be chronological or the way it came out, if you're doing, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, different things like that. And then, with the animation, there's just so much, again, it's just so much out there right now. Shoot, it would probably take a year for you to watch everything. So what you got for us?
So before I get into any questions, I just have to say the fact that you guys are doing this podcast, this room, I love seeing that. I love seeing my friends have hobbies, especially as we get older. It's so easy to get wrapped up in our work and just our family or just our work or whatever it might be. So I think it's so important to have these things that we can do to just enjoy life and actually delve into something big and something fun, something that's just pure enjoyment. So the fact that you guys are doing this, I really applaud it, and I love seeing it. So.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate that.
So what What got you, like, do you have an early memory of, when you first watched the Star Wars, or when you first became like, all right, I love this thing. Like, what kind of made you a super fan that you are now?
For me, and Nick, I'll let you go after. And we've talked about this before, but for me, I actually saw it in the movies when I was at the movies when I was 10 years old. I saw the first one, with my family. Went in, and we didn't have anything, no references. It was just this new space adventure that was coming out. It was really cool for a 10-year-old, to go in there and see these new creatures, these new worlds on this huge screen. When I watched it, and as we have the cliffhangers and things like that in these movies, it makes you want to come back for more. You're wondering what's going on. So you want to read the books, you want to get into the comic books, and then you start to get into the lore of it. You start to learn who some of these characters are. There was a lull, for me, especially in between the first three that came out and then, when the prequels came out. But for me, I was still a fan. It had sort of died off a little bit, had some, original collectibles and things like that. But when it started rumoring that they were going to have some new Star Wars stuff come out, for me, I just started getting more excited. And as they came out, I enjoyed them. I love the story of this, and I love what he did to bring it back so we could learn, more about Anakin and Darth Vader and this whole universe. So for me, I became a super fan when the prequels came out. I was already a fan before that. I would watch it, had the VHSs, if it would come on TV, I would watch it. Even back in the late 80s, early 90s, after, 83 was when Jedi came out, and then that was it for a while. They still had some books and stuff, and I really wasn't into reading them. I got more into reading them once this stuff came out again, these prequels, because I wanted to learn more. The lore and everything that goes along with it, because it's good and bad, good and evil, and it's part of what we have in the world here, but it's something that we can immerse ourselves in and enjoy. That's when I became a super fan, was when I knew the prequels were coming out, and and then it has continued since then, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I was, we're similar in age. I'm a little younger than you, but the prequels were coming out when I was really young. You would have been like prime age for, like, 99 is when episode 1 came out. And my first experience was in kind of preparation for the prequel trilogy coming out. They were showing the original Star Wars on TV. And one of my earliest memories is watching my parents sift through home videotapes to find out which tape would be okay to tape over. And
Yep.
so they, found one, and, like, as it was starting, put it in, taped the movie. So my copy of Star Wars as a very young kid had, like, commercials in it.
Yep.
And was on TBS and all that. And I've said it here before, but then at some point later on, right after Phantom Menace came out, so any time between, like, 99 and 2000, and it was out for rental on VHS, we went by a rental stand at a grocery store, and the whole section was all Phantom Menace tapes, and I recognized a lightsaber, Obi-Wan's lightsaber, in the poster, or the artwork, and I was like, we want to watch that. So then I got Phantom Menace, and I was hooked. I was completely hooked. And so I saw them in a weird order, because I saw the original, then I saw Phantom Menace, watched that about 1,000 times, and then saw Empire and Jedi, which are the other two originals. And then for the rest of that time, they were coming out. So 2 and 3 had yet to come out. So in that between time, I was just obsessed, and it was my thing. It was the only thing I was interested in, really, for a long time. And then I probably had a lull. Teenage years, I had a lull where I wasn't really,
It's not
crazy
cool
about it. Yeah, because, there was, like, a social cost to wearing it on your sleeve at times. And so I've made the calculation of, like, this is my thing, but whatever. But I've never said this on here before. Logan Masters, if you're listening, Logan, and it was some point, like, early high school, Logan and a bunch of our friends were at my house over a weekend at one point. I think we were probably like 14, 15. And one of them had gone into a closet and found all my toy lightsabers, like, kind of tucked away. And I remember walking up the stairs and seeing them like pick out lightsabers. I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh God, they found them. And then we went outside around the neighborhood in Harmony, Minnesota, small little town, and just beat the shit out of each other with lightsabers. And I was like, oh, okay, we're back. And then so at that time, Disney had yet to buy it. It was supposed to be it. And that was going to be all the Star Wars that there ever was. Probably similar to how Ron felt about the originals. And then Disney bought it and started putting out new books and saying there were new movies and all that stuff. And I got right back on the wagon. Because in a way, like, once you've tapped into all the comics and, sideshows and stuff, you're kind of limited at that time. And now there's something coming out all the time, whether it's a book, a show, a movie, a comic, or even just little shorts, like all that kind of stuff. So it's great for people like Ron and myself who just want to digest as much as possible.
And now you display your lightsabers
I do.
proudly.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Matt and I went as Sith for Halloween last year. Yeah. We have to put that up on the screen. But
we had some lightsaber battles at about 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
After a few adult beverages.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
When did you start reading and get into the books and stuff like that?
I was probably, it was right around the time of Revenge of the Sith, so I would have been 8 or 9, because I remember I was starting to read the novelizations of the movies.
So when you were 8 or 9, you were reading the novelizations?
Yeah, because Lucasfilm had a little bit of a quirk in the prequel days of coming out with really important stuff right before the movie came out. For example, the soundtrack to The Phantom Menace, they put that out right away, and one of the songs is titled Qui-Gon's Noble End. So, like, you go into the movie going, okay, well, Qui-Gon, I didn't know that as a kid, but people went in, well, I guess.
Yeah, something's going to happen to him.
And so I started reading, they would put out the novelizations like a week ahead of the movie. So I read at least the kids' version of Revenge of the Sith novelization before I saw the movie. Okay. I saw the movie opening night. So I knew, and I started reading it, and I knew that Anakin, executes Dooku, beheads him, and thought, like, I can't read anymore.
Right.
Because I don't want to know, like, whatever. So I would say like 8 or 9 is when I started reading that stuff. I got my first comic was a Clone Wars comic, but of the miniseries, so not the Dave Filoni series, the really cartoon one prior to that. That was my first comic. That would have been around the same time. Because it felt like as a kid, 3 years feels like forever. And that time building up like whatever's going on in the Clone Wars was like a huge deal. So I was reading that stuff late elementary school, I'd say.
Okay.
And then I would read later on, like in high school, and especially like later in high school, I got pretty caught up on the novels from like the expanded universe and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
yeah, I didn't really get into the books until probably when I was an adult and started just reading more and more to get more information. I was like, okay, it's done. I can read these books, but and they were, even the books were sort of limited, back in the early 80s and late 80s. A couple of them would come out like Heir to the Empire, the Thrawn story, but I didn't really get into them as much. And then as they started to come out more and more and we got more stuff, I was like, oh, okay, now I want to dive into these. But I still haven't read nowhere near as many as he has. I've probably read about a dozen, some comic books, but...
and that's kind of just a product of like, you probably would have done the same thing I did if
I was
there
young.
Was so much volume then, it's just like there was so many... Like, if you go on the internet and start looking at what people are talking about with Star Wars, and they're talking about these stories that I've never, like, that wasn't in the movie, and then you see that it's from a book, then I had to investigate it. I was obsessed with it. I had to find out. And then there was a time where I had to find out exactly what everything means all the time. And then you learn, like, well, it's kind of up to you at times, which is cool. I'm sure we'll get into that with some of the questions. But
the movies came first, right? And then they made it into books after?
Yeah, so let's say The Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace was made, and then they take the script and like some of the notes and then how it plays out, and then they novelize the movie after. So there's extra stuff in there, like what's going through their heads or things that maybe didn't make it in or got cut or whatever, that kind of give you, it's cool to watch the movie and then read the book and see sort of the motivations behind things, which also serves as a pretty nice little booster in any kind of argument that might come up. Because then you know, anything that looks kind of questionable or you go like, what happened there, I'm certain is explained in a novelization.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a cool thing I think they do in Star Wars is explain most of the stuff that comes, almost all of it, I think.
Yeah.
Whether it's in a book or it ends up, you know, this whole series that's coming up now, we got a lot of explaining to do in these next 3 episodes. But they usually do that pretty well. If there's something that some of these people or we're not sure about or something new pops up, they usually explain it in a book or at some point during the movie or the TV show or even the animated stuff, you know, which I think is pretty cool.
Like something just happened in the last episode of The Acolyte with a character and something that they're wearing, and it's very interesting. And so they just put out on the website and on Instagram a character description, and in that character description completely explains his helmet is made of this and does this. And it's like an old pull from like old books that they now made a real thing in a series.
So did they pull that from the Plagueis book?
It's for sure in the Plagueis book.
Okay.
I don't know if that's where it was
Originally.
We're talking about cortosis,
Right.
Everybody. It's a material that can deactivate a lightsaber if a lightsaber collides with it.
Yeah.
So it just fizzles out. And then it takes like, I don't know, 20 seconds to turn back on.
Yeah, and this is the first time that we've seen it in live action. And like Nick's talking about, they explain it in some of the books or comics or things like that, but this is the first time. And a lot of people obviously haven't read some of the books or comics and are like, wait a minute, what just happened here?
And then to be clear, like all you need to know if you're watching it is that if that guy headbutts your lightsaber, like it's going to turn off, you know?
Right.
And it's very cool looking. You know,
so there's no explanation of that in the show.
No,
but then later online.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's kind of inconsequential to the plot. It's just like a cool thing that he's doing in battle. But people like us want to know.
Exactly.
You know? Like,
yeah.
So.
And that's the thing, I think, when someone like yourself, you could watch The Acolyte, you could watch Mandalorian, Ahsoka, still enjoy it, I think. I feel like they've done a good enough job where you can enjoy it and you don't have to know every little intricate detail. But like Nick was saying, we want to know, okay, wait a minute. How come his lightsaber went out?
Yeah.
You know?
And so I think that kind of ties into my next question. When you see something like that, do you automatically think back to episode 1, 2, 3 and say, well, why didn't anyone use that then? Like when there's new elements added, is it still all connected, still one world, or do you have them kind of separated in your mind? Well, the original and the new stuff are a little bit different. How do you view it?
You want to take that one first?
Yeah, I got a whole process for that.
Love it.
It's not my process. It's just something that I, have gone through with reading stuff and trying to put it together. And then I found out on Twitter that there's a term for it called headcanon. You ever heard that term?
No.
So canon, like canonical means?
Yep.
So like headcanon, I would define it when people say it is that you're taking what you know about Star Wars, what you see, and then what may not be canon now, but was, and then also just like logic. So I'll give you an example of something that happens. Qui-Gon Jinn gets impaled by a lightsaber and eventually dies of his wound. There are a scene or two in some of the newer stuff where someone gets impaled by a lightsaber and then lives. And so that's like one thing where they're like, well, how come it didn't work? Or how come Qui-Gon died, but this person survived? I think the
That's
easy...
Liam Neeson, right?
Yep.
Only time he's died in a film.
Right? That's crazy, isn't it? Headcanon for me there is like, it's pretty clear. Qui-Gon Jinn gets dead center through the midsection, maybe through the spinal cord. Lightsabers cauterize wounds. So if you miss anything vital, you're not going to bleed out. You might internally bleed. They've also got incredible medical technology in Star Wars.
Right.
And you can go a step further that, like, depending on the character, maybe they're not used to making a kill shot. All those kinds of things. So that'd be like you try to make sense of it based on the information you have, rather than, saying bad or it doesn't work, that sort of thing. I see it all as the same universe, just different stuff. And like Ron said, eventually, if you look, you'll find something. And if not, it's usually, George Lucas, I think, put that in a lot in his interviews and stuff where, someone will ask him a really, really intricate question. He'll be like, sure, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Like, we could ask him a million questions and, maybe 2 of them would be consequential to the point he's trying to make. So they're all, it depends on the thing. I feel like I got away from the question a little bit.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right. I think the plot is what he's about, and the main story with George. And I think we've all sort of made it into this intricate thing. And another example is in A New Hope, when they're in the cantina and Ben chops his arm off, and you see the blood of this alien on the floor. And then afterwards, as we go on in Star Wars, which was okay back then, in 1977, first movie, we don't have anything. And then we figure out or find out that lightsabers cauterize and you're not bleeding out. Well, the explanation for that is that species, their blood does not cauterize like that. So that's why they had blood all over the floor and all over the arm, So I think that's a cool explanation. I think they're all together as well, like Nick does. So I take that and go, okay, cool. That's a good explanation for me. That's my opinion. That was a cool explanation. Good. I'm okay with that.
And you got to be aware that this whole thing this might answer a question later on, but this whole thing gets bigger and bigger as we move with it, and that they're going to have to end up going back and explaining little details like that. Like when they did the cool, at the time, very cool special effect of an alien losing his arm and blood everywhere, they're probably like, that's great. Then they cut Mark Hamill's hand off in the next movie and there's no blood, and they go, well, we got to figure something out for the differences, which is cool in my opinion, that they've always taken the time to look at every little thing and make sure that there's a bow on it,
Yeah, it's lined up. And before Disney, before George sold it to Disney, from what I recall and have read, he would everything, whether it was the comics or the books and the movies, he would have to okay it, to make sure that it sort of flowed the way that it did on that thread, so that you weren't all over the place on it, because again, you might take a character and do this with him, where he might already have done something else in this book or something like that, so George was like, okay, we want to make sure, and I'm sure he had other people that, helped him with the scripts, but make sure that it was in the straight line that pretty much went along with everything else, So I thought that was sort of cool that he did that and still continued to spend his time doing that to make sure that all of it was good to go.
Does he still do that? Is he still affiliated with the Disney product now, or
not really? Dave Filoni, for the most part, was sort of like he sort of like took Dave under his wing, did the Clone War stuff, and now has come out with Mandalorian and some of this other great things that he's done. So he sort of stepped into that. I'm sure there's probably some times when Dave might call him up on the phone and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, is this going to line up with that? For the most part, as far as I know, he really doesn't. There's always stuff on the internet. Oh, Lucas is coming back, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. So I'm sure Dave and him probably talk, or even John, they might talk a little bit, and, maybe Kathleen Kennedy gives him a shout to ask something. But for the most part, he is not, you're probably not going to see his name on there except for created by, because he was the creator of this.
He's always the first credit at the end.
When you see that.
Based on Star Wars by George Lucas.
That was probably one of his
stipulations
to sell it.
Yeah.
What do you guys see as like the biggest difference from I guess we'd call it the George Lucas era and the Disney era? Is there any material big differences that you see, good or bad?
Good, I think. Disney has so much money, they can make this stuff look really great. I mean, the volume, I think, is fantastic. They're able to dump in $180 million for this episode that's just come out, or these episodes for this new live action, $180 million for this TV show. So obviously they have the money to do that. I like what's going on with it. I think there is differences, obviously, throughout the years. There's twists and turns. In my opinion, it's still a cool story. I still enjoy what other people are coming out. Is everything that comes out, do I agree with, or do I think it's like the best thing ever? No. Episode 9 was not my favorite movie. Did they have some really cool Easter eggs in it and some really cool, cinematography? I mean, it was amazing. And those are the things for me. If I see these Easter eggs that bring me back to 4, 5, and 6, that's what I really like. I like to see some of the stuff where it's like, they're going, on 9 or 7, 8, and 9. They had so many cool Easter eggs from the originals with ships that were crashed on planets, and the Emperor's chair is destroyed, but it's still on the Death Star that has crashed into this planet, So those are the things I really enjoy, to see those type of things that bring me back to that childhood and to bring me back to everything here in Star Wars. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was going to say the volume is a big difference. We're always getting something now, which is awesome. Never had that before recently. It looks like it sometimes, I would even say, like you said about episode 9, I think episode 9 looks insane. It's not my favorite movie by a stretch, but it looks insane. And
Visually,
so, yeah,
graphics,
and that action is just nonstop during it. So, I'm not going to get into it. It's a little too like A to Z for me, but I don't hate it. The shows are also pretty insane too. For what it takes to make a movie versus a TV show, what they're able to do with the TV shows is pretty sick. Like The Mandalorian, you don't even have to know Star Wars or like Star Wars to think that's an awesome show. It's so cool. It looks cool. The story's great. I think if I were to compare the vibe, I think the Disney era really works hard to connect to that like original George Lucas Star Wars family vibe. Does that make sense? Like it always kind of comes back to the vibe of, family, knowing what you're doing all this for.
But I also think that they come out with stuff for 2024,
yes,
and 2025. To be politically correct, to be hey, this is what's going on in the world right now, so we're going to put this into the movie, whether we like it or not. And which I think is cool, because again, you change with the times. We all do.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool about them. Like you said, yes, they bring it back, but they also put the new stuff in to, I think, bring more fans in.
Yeah. And I think like the prequels did that politically with what, the prequels are basically like a big political drama with like war action. And that stuff is like historical references, but also what was going on exactly at that time for like us. 1999 through 2005 was a big time for us, in the world. And there's some references to that. He always kind of did that, like pulls from what's going on now. And I think Disney does that. And it's a little more like there's always new characters with the Disney era, like a lot of new characters that, you wouldn't assume you'd love, and then you now can't imagine it without them. Or they've taken characters from the original stuff and made them even more deep. So they've done they take like important characters from past stuff and just like add to their
story.
Which is cool. I don't think you would have had with the volume that we used to have, would have been able to do that. We got a whole movie about how Han Solo became Han Solo and how he met Chewbacca and stuff, which would have been an awesome story to read or whatever. But to get a movie of that, like Disney's the only person who can, or not person, people who can put that kind of stuff out. Like, hey, we're going to do a Han Solo movie. We're going to do a movie about how the rebels stole the Death Star plans. Bet you didn't even think that was going to happen. It's these cool little things that they can just keep pumping through.
Yeah.
So it's not always just like advancing the story. Sometimes it's going back and like adding depth or backstory.
And then once you see it, you can't really imagine the whole thing without it.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think it brings that character, if it's a specific character that you're looking for or that you like, now you can dive into that a little bit more. And I think they did a lot of that with these animation shows where we had some new characters, but they also dive into more with us. Well, they brought us Ahsoka, animation did. But then you also dive a little bit more into Anakin. These backstories I thought were really cool too, because again, it brings you back to some of the movies that you can watch. And now you're like, okay, that makes sense to me because now I know sort of what went on in his past or whatever the case may be. It was really cool. You know, they brought Tales of the Jedi. Bring Ahsoka to that level. Now we know what a badass Jedi she is.
That's Ahsoka,
you know,
spinny thing. There. Yeah.
I think it's really cool that they do, and they're able to do that to bring us more information. Now, again, you don't have to watch it. You could watch Solo and be like, okay, that's a really cool movie, and okay, we know Han Solo and Chewie and the Millennium Falcon, but that's all you really have to know. But like for me and Nick, I mean, we got to find out how he got his surname. We got to find out how they actually met, him and Chewie, you know, and what happened in between there, you know, how he got the Millennium Falcon from Lando, you know, what happened to the escape pod, you know, why does it look different than it did when Lando had it, you know? So for me, that was a really cool movie because I got to see some of those things that I knew, but I didn't get to see it until that movie came out.
Is there ever anything that you start watching or watch and it almost feels like you have to get through it out of loyalty? Like, this isn't my favorite, but I can't leave something unseen.
Yeah, for me, absolutely.
I'll give you an example for me. Jurassic Park is my favorite all-time movie. It was when I was a kid. It still is now as an adult. I love the original Jurassic Park. And every time a new Jurassic Park movie comes out, I'll go opening night. I haven't enjoyed a Jurassic Park movie since the first one, but I'll still go every night because I love the first one so much and I just love the world. But I know the movies have failed to live up to the original, but I'll still go because I just love the original so much. So do you ever feel that way with any of the new stuff or any of the like, that wasn't needed, but I have to invest in it?
Absolutely. For me, I think there is some things that I've like, okay, I'm going to watch it. I might watch it again and again just to get some more stuff just to get some more information on that. They haven't pissed me off that much. There's some things that are like, okay, I could have done without that, or, you know, I'm going to finish watching this because it is what it is. It's probably going to add to the story somewhere or something's going to come out of it. So if I can get a little bit out of something that I really don't like and it still adds to my knowledge or adds to my excitement for Star Wars, absolutely.
Yeah, I pretty much the same there. There have been some things that while watching it, I go, you know, that wasn't for me or like that sort of thing. But I think like overall, I'm like, it's such a big part of like what I think about on a daily basis that I have to see it.
Yep.
You know, like I have to know everything about it. For those of you who don't know, Matt and I work out of vans. You know, we go train people out of vans. And frequently in my in-between drives, you know, I might think of like, so what could happen here in this next episode of the Acolyte? Like what needs to happen to get them to the next, you know, point? Whether you like the episode or not, or whether I like the episode or not, I like can't stop thinking about like, okay, how does this round out? How does this, you know, where are we going?
Yeah.
So for me, I don't know if you call that loyalty or more just like mental illness.
But you want to gather as much information as you possibly can.
Yeah,
so
and
anything that's out there, you want to
like
consume.
like Ron said, they haven't pissed me off to a point where I'm gonna run to the internet about it. And I don't. One thing, like for example, the shows, they move differently than say a Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is long, very layered, like you and I were talking about earlier. I feel like the Star Wars shows are basically like an 8-hour movie that they chopped into 6 to 8 episodes. So sometimes, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Ron, sometimes an episode just stops and then you pick it up next week. And the episodes themselves are not self-contained. Like it's a long, so, you know, a lot of the criticism that you see comes from people watching the first 3 episodes of a Star Wars show when you've gotten none of the story yet. And it all, like, it's usually the last 50% of the show is where the meat of the story is. So I always have a grain of salt. If I'm ever not feeling it and I'm in like the first 30% of the show, I just tell myself to shut up. Because at some point, these things that I'm like, I don't know about that. At some point, it'll come around. And so far it has. Like there are things with the Acolyte. I was like, I don't know about this. And then literally next episode, there we go. Got the answer I was looking for. I agree with Ron. I think I'm going to be watching it till the day I die, no matter what.
Yep.
And I agree with you with the Jurassic Park. You know, it's like a source of community, I guess. I don't know if community is right. It's like your thing.
You're in too deep. You can't. You can't just stop.
But it's not
watching
that I don't
Yeah.
want to stop. Though,
Right.
You know, so it's
Right.
yeah.
Before the next question, does this make you want to go watch it more, or are you like, wait a minute, this is a little too much for me? Or
No, I've wanted to watch them all. That was part of the reason that I was really excited to come talk to you guys. Is that I just feel like I need that direction. Like, should I just start with 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, go chronologically?
right?
So I've wanted to, but I just feel overwhelmed with all the new stuff.
yeah.
Because I went on Disney Plus and I looked at the Star Wars set, and it's like 100 things.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So it just feels very overwhelming.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
For sure, and I totally understand that because again, we've been immersed in it already. So when it comes out, we're already caught up with everything. So it's like, okay, cool, we get some more. Like he's saying the same thing. I'm like that. Okay, what's going on this week? There's so much stuff. There's so much social media out there. I started watching a guy that loves Star Wars. He's got a podcast, and they do a lot of reviews, and he has hundreds and sometimes thousands of people on there and questions and stuff like that, and trying to talk about what everybody thinks about the next episode and what's going to come up and who do you think this person is and that person. And that's the same thing. Like Nick was saying, I do the same thing. I'm like, okay, what's going to go on in that next episode? Are we going to get the answer to this? Are we going to get to the answer to that? For 1, 2, and 3 of the Acolyte, it was people were sort of like, eh. And then even on episode 3, people were just dogging it. And I was like, but you have to have that episode because there was so much information that we got in that episode. It was telling the story. It wasn't lightsabers and blowing stuff up and the Force and, all this other stuff. But it was something that you needed to understand what's coming and what's past and mainly what's coming up, So that was the thing that I really enjoyed about it. These are our opinions, and everybody has their opinions. I think it's so cool that it is something that still occupies your time, what's going on and what's coming out, what's going to be on the movies and, what's the next cartoon that's coming out or animation to give us more information on it. So
I think for movie order, if you want to get onto that subject.
Yeah, since we're already there, we can definitely do that.
I've always thought you guys, you can correct me if I'm.
No, that's your opinion. I'm going to give mine.
My question for you is not going to spoil anybody listening. Like, do you know who Darth Vader is?
Yes.
Yeah. So so the biggest movie reveal ever is already because of pop culture or because you've seen it is already known to everybody.
Yeah.
That he's Luke's father. He's Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
So to me, when I've shown friends it, I've shown Madeline, Star Wars, all this stuff. Usually people know that already. So it's not as much of a huge deal as far as that big. That's the biggest moment in arguably the best movie. You're not going to ruin it by showing it in a different order. But I always take that moment as the litmus test for what order to watch the movies in. Because I love watching them 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9.
So chronologically, when they came or
Release date.
Yeah.
date.
Because you kind of grow with the movie. So when you're like Ron said when he saw it as a kid, people weren't going to Star Wars knowing anything about it. And so the things you learn watching it in release date order, you kind of get as it was being created. So I still don't think there's a better explanation of what the Force is than the 5 minutes Luke and Obi-Wan talk about it in the first like half hour of the first ever Star Wars. Whereas I'm sure it's not that bad, but if you go to the Phantom Menace, you're right in it. You know, you go to in chronological order, episode 1, you're right in it. You know, within the first 5-10 minutes, the lightsabers are drawn. You got stuff going on, which is very cool. But if you want to like kind of feel like you're getting it, I guess, I don't know if anyone gets it, but I think if you watch it in release date order, you kind of grow with the movies. But it's very cool to watch it 1 to 9 straight through.
In episode 1, 2, 3, do they kind of assume you already know the basic stuff from 4, 5, 6?
I would say a little, but not really.
Okay.
They still explain.
yeah.
They still explain like midichlorians.
Yeah.
You know, which we didn't know what that was. You know, and that's part of the Force. And they do explain some things, which I think is cool. But yeah, I mean, there's you can go back and forth with that.
Because you get like, you've seen episode 1, so it opens up and 2 Jedi show up to do negotiations, and everyone on the ship is freaked out, like they sent Jedi. So like, if you've never even seen it and you see that, they do a good job of like, okay, Jedi are a big deal, you know, all this kind of stuff. The prequels have a little more layering, I think, than the originals. Like there's a lot of sub-stories going on, the politics, the war stuff, the Jedi stuff, Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, Anakin and Padme's relationship. It's like a whole mix of things. And I personally think it's cool to have seen the originals and then go back and see how everyone got there. Because in the originals, you're thrown into a world where they're very much talking about a bunch of stuff went down and now we're here. But, you know, for years, Ron, you were like, well, a bunch of stuff went down and we're here. I wonder if we'll ever get to know what that is. So It's cool. That's just my opinion. I think release date order is cool if you want to grow with like the concepts and stuff with the movies. And then 1 to 9 is cool if you want to get that story from beginning to end. It's very cool. That's how Madeline and I just watched it, 1 to 9.
What did she think? What was her
she liked it
review?
A lot.
Yeah.
She had seen a lot of them at some point. She has 3 brothers, so she's seen them at various points, but hadn't really put together where things were. Some of it was a little emotional for her, and I agree. When I cried in the theater when Obi-Wan had to cut down Anakin, and it sucked. But
no, and that's a great explanation. I mean, I never really thought of it that way because, again, I had 4, 5, and 6 already. Mm-hmm. My opinion, for what you already know, Matt, and what you've seen already, I think to get the story and to sort of follow along, I like chronological for newer people or people that want to know, okay, I want to know this story. And I think that when you start out with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and then you see where Anakin comes into this. You see the Jedi Council. You see the bad guys start to come up. Because again, in 4, 5, and 6, all of a sudden you have this huge thing that, you know, that breeds, you know, and you're not sure what that is. And then you have this emperor who's like in charge of him. So I think it's cool to see all of that come to fruition first. And then, and actually, I think you definitely need to watch Rogue One in there before 4. Now, Solo, that's, you know, if you got time, obviously you got to watch that too. It's a great movie. But 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Rogue One, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for me. So chronological, but also adding in Rogue One, because Rogue One, I think, they did such a great job in it. There's so many people out there now that's like one of their favorite movies, even from the originals and the prequels. They loved it, and I think they did a great job with it. But I think that's you need that little piece of information in there, which I think is really cool that they did that. So for me, and there's no other reason for that. I just think you know who Luke and Darth Vader are. You know, we know who, Anakin is, but you get to see how Anakin turns into this just horrible person and why. And then you get to see the next generation come along. And then again, you almost see the next generation again with 7, 8, and 9. And I just think I feel like you get a clearer story if you already know, you don't have any spoilers. Because again, you know that already. You're not going to be like, oh my gosh, Darth Vader is Luke's father. You know that already. So now you can go back and figure out how Anakin became Darth Vader, and then what happens to Obi-Wan, and so on and so forth with some of these other ones. And again, you learn the political stuff, I think, as well in 1, 2, and 3. So when you get to 4, 5, and 6, you're like, oh, okay, this is why they're still at war. This is what they're doing. This is the rebels or the rebellion or whatever you want to call it. So that's my opinion on watching it, which I think are both good. It's going to be up to you and what you think and how you want to watch it.
But definitely 1 through 9, the movies, before getting into any of the shows or the one-off. I know you said Rogue One, but other than that, get through the 1 through 9 first, you'd say?
I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was another detail about the series that are coming out, is that they really seem to, both in time period but also in serving like particular characters or storylines, seem to have a direct line to the movies. So, for example, there's a show about Boba Fett, who is, a cool character from the originals that never had a big role or anything, and he became such a fan favorite because he looks so cool. And an entire civilization was made out of how cool his armor was. And so now you have the Mandalorians and you have Boba Fett and all that stuff. And it's cool to see that after you've seen the movies, in my opinion. You can do what you want, but I think it helps to have to already have been in the universe a little bit and to know the ins and outs from having seen it in the movie, and then go to a show that gets a little deeper in the weeds of it is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like your baseline.
Yeah.
You go, you watch all the movies, you have an idea who the characters are, sort of what's going on, and then you can go back, like Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back and figure out, okay, when after 4's done, or 4, 5, and 6, you can go back even from 1, you can go back or forward and watch Obi-Wan, which I think sort of ties everything into it. You have an idea of what he did in the time that he's on Tatooine. I think those are cool, but you definitely have to watch the first 9, I think, first, and then you can start getting into, because again, the Clone Wars, the animated series, there's so much stuff in between, and that's between 2 and 3, correct? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so many different stories in that.
It's a 7-season show with 20 some episodes per season,
and it's between
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, which is cool because again, you have battles. You're learning more about Anakin. They bring Ahsoka into this, so they bring a new character in who becomes huge. You learn a little bit more about some of the clone troopers. There's even stories with Yoda and some of the other Jedis that you're like, okay, I know who they are, but I really didn't. You see them for 30 seconds in the movies or 10 seconds in the movies, but now they have a little bit more that they can do and give you a little bit more backstory on some of them, which I think is great. You want that base first, and then you can start diving into the other stuff. And that's going to be the hardest part. We'll have to do another episode on that, is after you get done with the 9 or 10 movies, then we come back and figure out how you're going to put in, Mandalorian and Boba Fett and Ahsoka and the animated stuff.
Yeah, it's a baseline for sure. Again, this is just our opinions, but I think 1 to 9 is as smooth sailing as you can get, because you don't have to think about I just got done with the original trilogy. Now I have to imagine that this next trilogy, which is back in time, this is something Madeline said. She said, I'm having a hard time with the fact that these look so much more insane visually.
Oh, right.
But it's older. Yeah.
Sure.
If you can just go 1 to 9 and know I'm on track, You know, the next movie is the next movie.
That's what sounds like would be the easiest for me is going 1 to 9.
And
so that's probably what I'll do.
The discrepancy is like I had a friend in college who had never seen him, didn't know Darth Vader was Luke's father, didn't know any of it. So I was like, okay, I have to show it to him in release date order, because if I show him the prequels, he's going to know the whole time we're watching 4 and 5 that this is Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker's son. So like, you know, we showed him 4, 5, and 6. It was me and Austin, showed my friend Dylan 4, 5, and 6. There was a big, you know, whoa, he's his father. And then the conclusion to that is just so beautiful in Return of the Jedi. And then the big thing for him going back to 1, 2, and 3 is he like fell in love with Anakin, and then he's watching him get turned and like twisted around. And the big reveal for my friend was finding out that Palpatine is Darth Sidious.
Okay.
Which, you know, you could argue you could watch all 3 of them and it's very obvious that he is, but you know, when he finally tells him, his world came apart. He's like, no, this is how it happens. And, you know, and so it was cool to do it that way. But had he known who Darth Vader was and all that stuff, I say watch it all the way through, smooth. And then you know exactly where you are and you know where you're going. What else you got, Matthew?
I've got this. This could kind of be like a deeper question, and maybe you tell me. You know, I got to watch movies and find out for myself. But is the Jedi versus the Sith, is that as simple as good versus evil, or are there redeeming qualities of the Sith? Like, is it deeper meaning? What do you guys think? Without spoiling too much for me.
I think there's deeper meanings on all of it. I think yes, in layman's terms, for simple, you know, Jedi good, Sith evil, yes. But I also think that some of the things that the Sith want can be good. You know, at some point, you know, again, they're trying to bring, you know, maybe control, but also they don't want war anymore. You know, they want to bring it under their control. Whether they do a good job of controlling it, you know, that's your opinion. But I also think that and we're finding a lot out right now with this acolyte. You know, which we're starting to learn a little bit more that, you know, maybe the Jedi aren't as good as they were portrayed. You know, so because again, we're going back in time now with this new one. We're going back 100 years before even the stuff that we all know about. So I think it's I don't think it's as simple as good and evil. I think there's people that are once the Emperor takes over and there's an empire now. There's, you know, me and you are still, you know, I'm still going on tour. You're still working out, training people. You know, life goes on. It's almost like a presidency. You know, you might like the president that's in there, but maybe you don't. You know, that's my opinion of it. I think there's some good things that even in the Sith, you know, and in the Empire, there's some good things in there. I wouldn't pick that. It might be like like you had referenced before, it might be like a Nazi type of thing, you know, where they just want control and they're just going to, you know, kill a bunch of people or whatever. But also I think, you know, there was some things in there that, you know, people just, okay, we went on with life. It wasn't affecting me. And I think that's very similar today where, you know, a lot of people get tied up in the politics of the presidents or whatever. And it's like, again, for me, it's not affecting my day-to-day life. So because I'm not that close to, you know, that presidency or whatever. So we feel like we're in the heart of it, and Star Wars is in the heart of it. They're right in the meat and potatoes of political stuff and the war and the good and evil. But I think that I don't think it's cut and dry. I think there's a lot of gray in there.
Nick, do you agree?
Well, mostly. I think Ron's right. It's gray. Because, you know, like Ron said, the Jedi as a whole, as an institution, probably fails at the thing they say they are on the whole. And that's why some of the characters that we end up loving through the story, I don't know would you agree that like people like Yoda and Luke and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka end up becoming, or at some point becoming what a Jedi actually is, as opposed to what the institution became. The institution became like pretty like tied down with politics and all that kind of stuff, and also not that good, you know. And the ironic thing is the peacekeepers who weren't hungry for power gained all the power. And that's kind of the irony between like Jedi and Sith. The Sith want power at all costs. And I think part of the story of Star Wars makes the Sith look a little redeeming, because a big part of pulling Darth Vader in is saying like, hey, the Jedi are, you know, they don't take you seriously, and I can help you. You think your wife is going to die? I can help you save her. And then so it makes you feel in that moment that he's like, I'm doing the right thing by learning from this guy, because he's going to help me save my wife. And they're telling me, just let it go, man, you know. But I think as you get along, like someone such as the Emperor is evil. And I think he embodies evil. I don't think Anakin Skywalker was evil. I think Darth Vader became evil, but it took a lot of doing to get him there. And I think, you know, the control is one thing, but you know, evil's a different thing when you're willing to like take out millions of people like that in order to just quiet the crowd. You know, like there's something uniquely evil to me about the Sith sort of line of getting things done. And the only way that they can attain so much power is by feeding into things like hatred and like craving power, not necessarily holding a lot of sanctity for life, you know, that sort of thing. That feels kind of evil to me as a big time Sith like the Emperor. But I think Anakin Skywalker as a person was someone who was manipulated to do horrible things, and then out of those horrible things kind of became Darth Vader, where that seems a little more understandable as a human being, to be like, man, it's good. The hero made the wrong choices. And that's where I would say, yeah, it's very gray. And I think certain characters like the Emperor or Darth Sidious are put there to show you like that's evil. This stormtrooper over here is just some guy who enlisted in the military. Right. You know, he's a part of the evil guy, has such control over the thing that a lot of these people have no idea that they're evil. And then, you know, they do some pretty awful stuff along the way. And that's kind of like a rite of passage for Sith, is to do some pretty hard things, like, you know, kill people out of anger or frustration, or execute people, and sort of like get them to toe the line a little bit. Whereas the Jedi, it's gray because they will go kill people if they have to. But their whole thing is like peace and harmony, justice, that sort of thing. But what makes them so powerful and trusted is that if they need to handle business for the good of everybody, they're going to go do it, and they're going to go do it better than anybody. So it's very gray, and I think there are extremes of good and evil in characters that are put there to show you, like, if you really go down the rabbit hole, you end up at good and evil. Like Yoda and Palpatine are like totally opposite figureheads of each movement.
Everyone else somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah. And I figured it would be something like that, but as an outsider looking in, it kind of just feels like Jedi good guys, Sith bad guys, and that can get boring. So showing that there's a little bit of both, and I haven't seen episode 2 or 3, but I kind of know what happens. Mm-hmm. And that storyline, like I really want to watch 1, 2, and 3, because I love that idea of he starts as a Jedi, gets turned, and like what, I don't know how or what happens, but like that is what intrigues me. I really do. I'm looking forward to that.
Can I watch 3 with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
That's
sure.
my favorite one.
Yeah. I have some kind of more lighthearted, some fun questions too, if we can get to those.
I want to go to the one with and I forget their names. I want to go to that Game of Thrones one.
Oh yeah.
So tell me the directors' names or whatever.
I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and like most people, very disappointed with the last season. And the two directors, I I forget their names. I'm trying to pull them up.
DB Weiss is one of them.
Yep. David Benioff and DB Weiss.
Okay.
So HBO wanted to keep Game of Thrones going forever because it was their most profitable show ever. So they wanted to keep going. And then those two directors got offered to do, I don't know if it was a new movie or trilogy or show, but they got offered to do Star Wars. Mm-hmm. So they said, let's wrap this Game of Thrones thing up. Let's end it. Let's do one more season, and then we're going to go make $1 billion Star Wars doing and Disney. So they wrapped it up, did a very, I would say, poor job. Just with, it felt like it was very rushed because they were getting out. And the backlash from the ending of Game of Thrones was so big on the internet and just across the kind of the audience that Disney or Star Wars dropped them. They said, no thanks. And that's just what I've heard or read. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I don't know if you guys have heard that story or if there's any truth to it.
So when Nick sent me that stuff today, I actually looked it up. And what I read was that they were too busy at that time. They didn't want to take away from, which obviously you think they did, but they didn't want to take away the time from Game of Thrones and try to do both of them at the same time. So what I read today was that they bailed out of that and were like, and Kathleen Kennedy was like, we'd like them to come back and do something when they slow down a little bit, and what happened in between there, I don't know, or maybe they're still talking to him. I don't know. But that's what I read today was that they turned it down because they were too busy and they wanted to give 100% to Star Wars.
So they turned it down.
Yeah, that's what I read, that they were just like too busy to do that because they were working on Game of Thrones, which I think is funny because there's so much backlash now with this Star Wars stuff, and now you're sort of talking about the last season of Game of Thrones, which I watched. I watched all of them. I liked them, but I wasn't into them like I am this. Mm-hmm. So, but I understand where you're coming from because there is a lot of people right now that even some of the Disney stuff, they're just like, oh, Star Wars is dead. Disney ruined it all. Obviously, we don't think that, but so I think it's funny that with HBO having that for them and doing that for how many seasons it was, and then for you to be like, the last season was such and such. But that's what I read today because I thought that was an interesting question, and I knew that was something a few years. I think it was like 2018. There was like 2018. Yep. They were talking about that. And like I said, what I read today was that they sort of bailed out of it and were like, hey, you know what, we want to put 100% into that, and we can't right now. So
does the Star Wars community get kind of defensive when a new director, does it get bad like on the internet?
They get defensive about everything.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah. They also, to that point, to be fair to the whole crowd, is that Star Wars, in preparation for any possibility, like signs directors and actors all the time. So like the guy who played young Han Solo, I believe is still signed on for like 2 or 3 more movies just in case they make another one, like that sort of thing. And so there's always, every year there's like talks of someone, a director, like doing a series or a movie or a trilogy. There's talks, or they slate it out for a long time. So there's a movie right now scheduled for 2026, the same day Dune Messiah is scheduled to come out. And someone said, oh, this will be awesome. And some of the more Star Wars nerds on Twitter are like, that's literally just there just in case. Like they probably haven't decided even what to put there. There's no title to it. So to prepare for making all this stuff, because they're constantly working on stuff, they slate things out and get in talks with directors all the time. Which could have been what they were doing with the Game of Thrones guys.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I recall that story. I recall them saying they were going to do a movie. Season 8 came out, and before season 8 was even over, Lucasfilm said like they're not doing it.
Right.
And it looked bad. Like they got dropped.
It feels like they rushed it to get to Star Wars.
Yeah.
but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and again, I saw it on the internet, so not everything on the internet is true. But that the one thing that I pulled up that was the story that they gave, which would sort of make sense. And speaking on that topic too, just like with Ron Howard. I mean, he wasn't the original director for Solo, correct? It was somebody else, and then I don't know if he bailed out or they fired him or whatever. And then Ron Howard came in, Opie from the Andy Griffith Show. That's what I remember him as.
What did he do?
He did Solo.
Okay.
Yeah, and and I thought he did a great job with that. And he's done some other one. I mean, he's directed a bunch of great movies.
Yeah.
I'll throw them up here as I pull them up. But I just thought that was a cool question when Nick put that through. I really didn't know that. I knew I'd remembered hearing some things about those guys directing it, but I didn't know the whole story. So I was sort of deep diving in that a little bit to see what was going on.
Yeah. We may never know what really happened.
Right, right. Exactly.
PR's ahead of us on that one, probably.
Yep.
What's another fun question, Matthew?
So, episode 1, rocking the episode 1 shirt.
Nice.
Pod Racer.
It's one of the few movies I've actually watched like front to end. And Darth Maul, by far my favorite character. I saw the movie when I was 10 or 11. He was the coolest. He was the best fighter. Do you guys have favorites? Do you have a character that you either just love or maybe you relate to the most?
Relate to? I don't know about relate to, but I mean, I definitely have some favorite characters. I mean, mine is Yoda. But again, I love a bunch of them. But if you were like, okay, who is your favorite character? It's Yoda. But I also think that there's so many cool characters in this. Ahsoka has become one of my new favorite characters because I think they did such a good job from where she started to where she is now, and what an amazing fighter that Anakin trained, which I still think is such a cool story for her to be this amazing, cool, still pretty good human or whatever you want to call her, but she still has a good heart, and she was trained by Anakin, and she knows everything that's going on. But I think that's something cool. I think about the Star Wars universe that Dave has brought into this, that Filoni has brought, some of these new characters which are phenomenal. But Yoda's my favorite. But I mean, I loved them all when he came out. I was like, oh, this is a badass right here. And same with Grievous. I thought Grievous was phenomenal.
Matt hasn't met Grievous yet. He's the guy in the middle there
with the forearms. Oh, and he holds all the lightsabers.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I've seen him.
That he's taken from the Jedi that he's killed.
Okay, that's cool.
I think they did a great job with him. In the movies as well. So I have a couple good guys and bad guys. I loved Qui-Gon. I thought Qui-Gon was good. I love Ben. I love Obi-Wan. For me, it's going to be Alec Guinness before Ewan, but I think Ewan did a great job, and I love Ewan as well. But for me, just because of the old school in me, Alec Guinness came out and just crushed it and did a great job and set it up for Ewan to crush it as well. And I think he did a great job. Just with everything that he's done with that. And
hello there.
That's what Ben was. Walks up on Tatooine and is hello there.
Yeah.
So those are mine. Again, I think they're all cool. Now, Jar Jar was not my favorite. But some people love him. But Jar Jar had to be in these movies. Jar Jar is a key point in these movies, and some of the decisions that he's made, and some of the things that he's done throughout the movies. So you had to have him in there, whether you liked him or not. He's part of the movie, and if you didn't have him in there, the movie wouldn't be the same.
Correct.
Is he in? So I know he's in 1.
He's in 1, 2, and he's in a shot of 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's in the Clone Wars.
Yep.
He's in a lot of the Clone Wars stuff.
He's probably, from what I would imagine, the universally least like characters. Am I correct in assuming that?
I think so. Yeah. For sure. When that came out, he did get a lot of heat.
But I will say this: Ahmed Best played. His name Ahmed Best is the actor. Is a phenomenal dude. Jar Jar Binks was the first ever motion capture character on screen ever. So you can thank any cool movie that you saw with a character that was like live action but animated a little bit. You can thank Jar Jar Binks for that technology. Maybe edit that out if I'm wrong and we Google it later, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Shout out to Jar Jar. We don't have a Jar Jar drop, Ron?
No, I don't. I don't.
And and as a small child, he was the funniest dude ever.
Oh, yeah.
Like we all loved him as kids. And that's, in the original trilogy, there's plenty of that in there. Like Ewoks, even George Lucas has talked about how, the grown-ups watching Star Wars hated R2-D2 and C-3PO because they thought they were, this comedic relief is, it's not serious. And he's like, no, these characters mean something. And the whole audience enjoys something. And like Ron said, Jar Jar does some pretty serious stuff kind of inadvertently that sets the whole thing into motion. But if I were to say my favorite character, it's Obi-Wan for sure.
I thought you were going to say Chewbacca.
No, Chewie's my dog, literally. Yeah. But no, Obi-Wan's for sure my favorite. I don't know if I relate to him. I'm sure as a kid I absolutely did in my mind.
Yep.
I just love him. My version was mostly Ewan McGregor because I was watching that version of him, come up. I love the Alec Guinness version as well. I think Obi-Wan, when you really get into his story, is like, people would argue with me on this. I think he's literally the perfect Jedi and how it's supposed to be. I think he's constantly sacrificing. He constantly has like a bigger picture in mind, puts himself last all the time. We've talked about this. He beats everybody. He's not the most powerful. Yeah, he's not the most powerful Jedi ever, but he beats everybody. He loses a couple times, but
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Is there a hierarchy of powerful fighters? Like, is that a debate in the Star Wars community, or is there a consensus? Like,
kind of.
Yeah. Yes and no. I think you want to take this one first.
Yeah. Well, if there were a consensus, you would think Vader would have beat Obi-Wan every time, but he doesn't. Obi-Wan, he beat him twice?
Yep.
And then, sacrifices himself to him to lose in the original Star Wars. So if there were a consensus, that would kind of throw it off a little bit. I think there are some things like Yoda and the Emperor are kind of on that level together. Sort of implied by Yoda in episode 3 that Yoda says, I have to go fight the Emperor because if you do, he's going to kill you.
Says that to who?
To Obi-Wan.
Okay.
And that Obi-Wan has to go take out Anakin. They're planning how to figure this out. I don't know, Ron, I think there's like a hierarchy, at least at that time. Those two kind of have the most going on. They're kind of controlling good and evil, or the light and the dark at that time. In a lot of the comics, the Emperor kind of beats the shit out of Vader like all the time to teach him lessons. So it's implied that there's a hierarchy there of some kind, at least in the Sith path. But everyone's got their own thing. Like the way that Ahsoka fights is completely different from, anybody else. Qui-Gon is pretty powerful and Maul killed him. Obi-Wan was a Padawan and killed Maul, or beat Maul. But, yeah.
And then he killed him.
Yeah, and then he killed him later, Mace Windu, you'll see when you watch 3, kind of a toss-up if he beat the Emperor or not. Who knows? But I don't know. I might be going
No,
off.
I think you're right. But yeah, I think it's like a Yoda, and it's almost Mace. I think is like the number 2 guy, whether it's the vice, or you want to look at it as a vice president or whatever. But I think he was probably next most powerful. And he was very set in his ways as well. And you have the Jedi Council. You don't get into it too much. And you have somebody like Dooku who beats Yaddle.
Mm-hmm.
There is a hierarchy, or there is a powerful one, but I think you would, if we had 2 more Star Wars fans in here, somebody might be like, no, I think Mace is more powerful than Yoda if they were to go battle to battle. And that's a lot of some of the social media stuff. You'll see polls on there,
Yeah.
you know, would old Anakin beat Luke at his prime and you know, Vader at his prime? And it's going to be a debate no matter what. I think there is, you know, it's like an emperor and then you have Vader, which I just found out Tarkin was actually technically above Vader
in the
in the hierarchy type of Grand Moff Tarkin is one of the big wigs in Palpatine's army or military force, whatever you want to call it. So Vader really wasn't part of the army. He was just like his right-hand man.
He's enforcer.
The enforcer to go and do what the Emperor didn't want to do.
It's like the mountain.
You know, but a general or a 4-star general, which maybe Tarkin would have been, or even like Thrawn, might have been more higher ranking. But Darth Vader was, you know, the right-hand man, and he was the enforcer. People are going to debate that as well. But I think that's, you know, the simplest explanation would be like a Yoda, and then maybe like a Mace Windu, you know. And again, I don't know on the council there, because again, it's crazy how, you know, some of these battles are won and lost. Obi-Wan defeated Maul, and then he ends up killing him way later, you know, after Maul comes back, and we do that whole thing. But I also think it's just, there's other people that probably could have beat, you know, Obi-Wan. But again, he takes out Grievous.
And they all have different, you know, a little pull from the novelization of one of the books. Once Anakin and Obi-Wan are both like full-fledged Jedi Knights, there's a comment made that like Obi-Wan is regarded by like Yoda and Mace Windu as the best defensive fighter ever. He's like an impenetrable shield. And then Anakin is like the greatest offensive weapon ever. So together they're like the dynamic duo. I mean, I think the quote is they're complementary halves of the same warrior. And so when they're together, like it's hard to beat them when they're, you know, when they're working together. One thing, I'm going to get deep for about 20 seconds.
Let's do it.
I think a character to consider is the Force. If you view the Force as a character, the way things are teetering kind of dictates who wins and loses. So, you know, episode 3, the Force is very much with the Sith. Like they have manipulated the course of time to where like they're very hard to beat. And so then 10,000 Jedi lose, you know. And I think there's more going on than just the hand-to-hand stuff. I think it's like there's a lot going on around them where it's more than just like moves. There's very much a cosmic battle going on as well that can dictate those things and maybe mess with your head, cloud your, you know, there's a whole thing with this latest episode of The Acolyte where they're saying like, man, this guy that we're fighting doesn't follow the rules of engagement, and he gets into your head and he stays in your head. And that's how he described fighting this guy. And later on, he gets his neck snapped by him. And so it's like, there's more than just the hand-to-hand combat going on, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone would agree with that.
Oh, I think so, because I've been watching Ahsoka again, and with Sabine, she doesn't really have the Force power,
and she's a Mandalorian who's a great fighter. Sorry, continue.
No, yeah, who's already, you know, doesn't really have the midichlorian count like some of these other larger Jedi or more powerful Jedi, but supposedly everybody has the Force in them. It's how you are trained to use it and how you feel, you know. And I think it's very similar to almost like if you're going to put good vibes out there. If there's so many people putting good vibes out and everybody's in a good mood, the room's going to be happy and fun, and everybody's going to be laughing and doing some cool things. But if everybody's just in a shitty mood or pissed off about something, there's a whole bunch of people in that room that are like that whole room is going to be dark. So I think that's a good. I think the Force is a character.
Yeah, I think you can follow the events of the movies and kind of like see why dominoes fall in certain places based on the way things are feeling in that way,
rather than just,
you know,
this
guy's better than this
other.
guy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do they ever get into that? Like is there a higher power? I know they talk about the Force all the time, but do they ever explain like where that comes from and if there is a higher power?
That is there. I think that's what the Jedi would consider like is God, or like a higher power. When they die, they believe you become the Force, like you become all of this thing. And then ironically, sidebar, the Sith seem to be pretty obsessed with living forever. And ironically, the Jedi understanding of the Force actually leads them to living forever, just not in a body. They become a Force ghost, and they literally are the living Force, because they become it. And then, Yoda and Qui-Gon, when Qui-Gon's dead, learn how to talk to each other. And then that sets off, when Obi-Wan dies, when Yoda dies, they figure out how to be present. But they can't just come like tap you on the shoulder and tell you to do this. Like you still have the free will. They come to you when you're ready to see, like that sort of thing. And so I think the Force is that higher power. And they say like midichlorians are like an organism in the like in your blood that communicate with the Force, that sort of thing. There's little explanations like that.
It's almost like the wind. You can't see it, but you can feel it.
Yeah. It's tangible. It's a real thing. It's not a...
It's the thing that basically is responsible for all living things. Yeah. There's some kind of thread through there that is shared.
Yeah, and I think with that, I really, that's the part I did like, and I think it was 9 when Rey's down and all of the Jedi are talking to her, from all the movies.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
To your point before about Jedi good, Sith evil, I think their interpretations of how to use the Force kind of summed up would be the Jedi are more like, we want to know about it. We want to be at one with it. And you are endowed with these powers and abilities. You are responsible for all living things. The Sith are like, I'm going to bend it to my design. And that's a very sort of unnatural thing. You can't bend the wind to you can try, but at some point, it's not going to work. And the Sith can be very successful in doing that and
being unnatural.
Yeah, exactly.
When you said that, I went right to that spot,
And so that's kind of like what throws things out of balance, so to speak, is that they try to manipulate the events of reality to this Force. Like it is mine. If I'm the strongest, I will, it will bend to me rather than, I'm not going to go with the flow. Bunch of idiots, like you're weak for thinking that, and you deserve to die because I said so, like that sort of thing. You can take that however you want to with the good and evil thing, but
no, I like that.
Yeah. What else you got? You got any more?
Nick mentioned something about duel or fighting etiquette or lightsaber etiquette, and I like to send Nick funny videos from Instagram, like Star Wars stuff. And there's one the other day where these two guys were in some kind of sanctioned duel, a lightsaber duel, and one of the guys just takes his and just throws him at the other guy, and it looked really funny. I sent it to Nick. He didn't think it was funny.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
He responded. He said, "Yeah, Yoda does that." I was like, "Oh, so you can throw your light?" And I've also
Vader
asked
does
Nick
it
about why they don't shut it off, turn it off and on, and use it in a different manner. And I'll let you explain some of that, fighting etiquette, if there is any.
I'm going to pull from a lot of things that I don't know where it's from. So people out there, don't crucify me for this. So from what I know is that is a thing. People do it. You actually see it a lot in certain parts of the movies or the shows or the animated shows in particular, where they'll flick it on and right through somebody. That's a thing. What I remember from, I think it was like Old Republic stuff. So this is like thousands of years before the movies is where this era of stories comes from. There is a lightsaber form called Tricata. I don't know why it's called that. And people did it as like, their primary source of combat. So they'd like flip it off, flip it back on, kind of deceive you into making moves and kill you. And from what I recall from those stories is that the Jedi think that that's dishonorable and forbid the practice. and that the Sith think it's a weak ass move, and think like, fight, turn your laser sword on, fight me like a man, and so they both forbid the practice, and then also because people stopped doing it because I guess they had to adapt their lightsabers to flick on and off really fast, and that made them like weaker or more unreliable. So when you're going up against like a fully trained Jedi or Sith doing that, you gotta be sure it's a kill shot, because they're not only fighting you, they've got your thoughts here, they've got years of anticipatory training or whatever. So it like kind of died out. That's like the old canon version of what that's about. I would think my head canon version of it is like I just said, if you're gonna flick it off and flick it back on, you gotta be positive that that's a kill shot. Otherwise, Jedi's gonna.
You're leaving yourself exposed.
Yeah,
Right.
like
yeah.
you
For
got
that half a second or whatever, they're gonna just okay, you're done. Thanks.
Yeah.
You missed. Sorry. Bye.
Yeah, and so it's probably really hard to get done well, And I'm sure, I wonder, if we were in that world, like, does a lightsaber turn on at the same rate every time? Seems like in the movies they don't. Sometimes when Vader turns his on, it's a little slow and creepy. Other times they're right on, I don't know how that works. But
Yeah. No, and that's what I've heard. It's more of a dishonorable move.
Unsportsmanlike.
Yeah. Right.
Which goes back to are the Sith truly just evil? And if they were, they probably wouldn't care. But if they have some kind of honorable, like, if I'm gonna win because I can beat you, not from a cheat move.
And I think they do.
Yeah, I think they do. They probably use
Then you have
Acolyte. It seems like he does when he kills Jeki.
that he does do that.
Yeah, because when he takes you, does he stab her 3 times or does it turn on and off 3 times?
Oh, I think he stabs her 3 times.
Okay.
I'm not positive, but I think that all of that is that you have the rule of 2.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't break that for
Yeah.
1,000 years, and this is a Sith rule. So I think they have their rules as well. So I think, like you said, they're like, hey, you know what? That's a weak ass move. We don't teach that.
Can you explain that rule of 2?
You want to do that?
If it's over my head,
No,
you
it's
can
cool.
tell me.
No, it's cool. Yeah, there was thousands of Jedi and Sith, and there was a war, and Nick's going to explain it a little bit better.
Yeah. Should we go all the way back? Tons of Jedi, tons of Sith. Intergalactic War. Jedi lost. Jedi come back and win. When it was obvious that the Sith were going to lose, it wasn't so obvious to everybody, and there was a lot of infighting involved. So this guy, his figure's back there somewhere. Yeah. His name's Darth Bane. He's a cool guy. Very, very evil. He decided we're going to lose, and all this infighting might take us out anyway. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many people going for power all the time. And the Jedi in numbers are like a 1 unit thing. Like they're going to beat us. So he takes an apprentice out of all of them, because typically also like Sith are taking people who are already around. They're not like taking kids all the time like the Jedi do. Takes an apprentice of the Sith Order and he says, we're going to actually help the Jedi win. So they start killing off other Sith. And then the Jedi win this war, and it's apparent to them, like it should be, that they've gotten rid of all the Sith. They won. There's balance in the Force. All this stuff, or maybe there isn't. I don't know what that really means, but the Sith are extinct. There's no sign of them because Darth Bane and his apprentice are the only ones left, and they got lost. They got the hell out of there. And so his plan is we're going to do this rule of 2 with a master and an apprentice. There are only 2 Sith Lords. The master holds the power and, kind of like gains and secures the power, and the apprentice craves it. And the only way the Sith line continues until they reveal themselves again with a big plan is if they, the master lays it down and the apprentice eventually becomes more powerful than the master and kills him, and then takes an apprentice. And it moves incrementally their strength forward forever until they're ready to make their move. And the Jedi have no idea of it. So for like 1,000 years, they're becoming like very small, but like incrementally more powerful, more, diving deeper into the dark side and that sort of thing. And so as the Jedi are just practicing the same stuff for 1,000 years, building the order or whatever, the Sith are moving the needle with their stuff in secret. And so there's always 2 Sith Lords, and then they might recruit other people to do their stuff, like other things that might be, aspiring Sith or whatever. But the move is usually I find an apprentice, I make them as powerful as possible. If they come at me and I kill them, they weren't good enough anyway. But if they come at me and they kill me, then that's the next in line. And it's expected you will end up killing your master at some point. For example, in episode 1, when it comes to like Sith Lords, 2
There's
of them.
only 2?
Yeah. Except way back in ancient history, there was a ton of them.
And they talk about some of the stuff because, again, as you get into it again, there's in some of the games and stuff, you have Star Killer, where some of these Jedi don't really take on an apprentice, but they take on someone that's like a right-hand man for them or right-hand woman for them, someone that's going to be an enforcer for them. Where like in some of the books, the animation too, you have Asajj Ventress, who Dooku takes on as like an apprentice, but obviously she can't be an apprentice, but she's
like an assassin for
Yeah.
him instead of a Sith apprentice, because he's the Sith apprentice. It's like a whole, so there's like gray area
yeah.
in that.
Yeah, but in the rule of 2, there is always a master and an apprentice, and that's it. So again, Asajj is not a master or an apprentice. She's neither one of those. It's Dooku and Palpatine. It's Palpatine and Vader. It's Plagueis and Palpatine. So there's always 2. And from like what Nick was saying, from Bane up to his apprentice, from then on, it's just the rule of 2. But again, they've hidden themselves.
Also in plain sight.
Yeah.
For a lot of them, like the sort of end stages of their plan that they all kind of come up with in different ways is that they'll eventually infiltrate like the highest points of society as a regular person, whoever they are supposed to be, and their kind of true selves is now this Sith Lord. And so by the time we get to the 1, 2, and 3, Palpatine's a huge, brilliant politician, and his master is like the head of all banking in the galaxy. So it's like they're infiltrated where they can actually now move the needle on events in all worlds and everything. Whereas like when they start, they're just Bane and his apprentice are practicing the dark side, like getting it.
I never realized that because I would have thought, you have a bunch of Jedi and a whole bunch of Sith. I never really realized there's only 2, and they're just kind of infiltrating, laying low
In the shadows.
snakes in the grass.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And they are, and they're doing all these things behind the scenes and getting everything situated so that when it does come to fruition, they become the Empire.
They're right in there. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. It all does have something, where with the Clone Wars, Cypher Diaz goes and orders these clones for the Jedi, but it's really for the Empire once he takes over. So it's pretty cool how it all twists and turns together and comes together as like a big huge puzzle.
Long-winded answer for what the rule of 2 is, but
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Here to learn.
yeah.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions I have for you guys.
So what are you gonna do?
My wife Andrea, she doesn't know this yet, but we're gonna watch episode 1. Probably not tonight, but at least this week we're gonna get them started.
That's the cool thing about Disney Plus too, I think, is now you don't have to wait for it to come on. You don't have to go buy it. You don't have to go rent it. I mean, they're all out there, especially now. It's cool because if you're watching it and you got to go do something, hit pause, come back to it in an hour, or come back to it tomorrow or whatever, and then, continue to go through it. Me and Tyrone actually did it during COVID. He had never seen all of them. So we went, I'd go to his place. He'd come over here and we watched all 1 through 9. And we also watched Rogue One and Solo, which was cool. And he was, he watched, I think he said he watched The Empire Strikes Back way back, but that was about it. And that's all he really knew. it was cool for me to watch him watch it as well, because of such a big fan I am. And his brother is a huge fan. Which
That's
is
interesting that
yeah.
he's not, that he
Yeah.
hasn't seen him, and his brother is a huge fan.
Yeah.
Did he like him?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, he did. Yep. So cool. And that's why I started this. And that's why I wanted to bring Nick on, because again, it's a fun thing to talk about. It's interesting. It's a great story. Yes, it is technically good and evil, but there is some gray in between. It's black and white, but there is, like yin and yang. And we're learning a lot more with this new stuff coming out, which I don't think is too far out of the Star Wars universe, like some of these people are trying to hate on. I think we're still in the universe, and I think we're learning things, which I think is cool. And I think, again, like cortosis, which has already been mentioned somewhere, I'm enjoying it, and they're just going to keep coming out. And I say this, I think, almost on every episode, but I started when I was 10, and I'll be 57, and it's just going to continue. So hopefully, I'll have Star Wars my whole life, So, but yeah, it'll be fun, I think, and it's fun, I think, to watch with someone, maybe for the first time, like with your wife, or if the three of us get together and watch a couple episodes together or something like that, because you can also be like, oh, hey, so why did that do that, or what happened there? It's out. We're not really spoiling anything for you, but you'll understand maybe something a little bit more instead of having to go back and try to find it, where we might have that answer for you already. I mean, you can always, if you get into it and become a super fan, then you're going to Google and read the books and stuff like we do. I think it's cool when you watch it with someone as well. You can sort of bounce some things off of them.
I like that idea, and that'll also keep me and Andrea honest with not picking up our phones. If you're there, if we all watch together, it'll be like, all right, it's a watch party, phones away.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you coming out, and I think it's a cool episode to talk to someone like yourself, because again, everybody we've had on here is either in the movies or has seen all of them and is a super fan or a pretty big fan, like Nick and myself. So I think it's really cool to sit here and talk to you, and some of the questions you had were really cool, and it explains a little bit more of the universe and gets you maybe a little bit more excited about watching it, and shit, after you watch one, you might be texting both of us going, hey, what about this? And what about, which, hey, we're always up to talk about Star Wars, obviously.
I'll keep you up to date on our not a trilogy. What's the saga? I don't know.
Yeah, saga.
Yeah.
They're each
Our
trilogies.
progress,
There's
right.
three trilogies, but so I have a little gift that I give to our guests when they come on here. So I appreciate you coming out, but it's just a little Star Wars.
Oh, so cool! Wow, I'm a real Jedi.
It's official.
This is what the Jedi drink out of, right?
That's right.
This is
That's
actually
right.
how they initiate everybody. They give them a coffee cup.
I love it. Oh, we got Yoda on it too.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you, Ron.
No, absolutely. Thanks to both of you guys for coming up and doing this one. I had a great time. It was fun. Nick sent me the questions. It was fun looking through them and knowing what my answers were going to be, but then also looking up some other ones. And that's what we do, when there's stuff like I just said with that cortosis, we were both, he was hitting me up and I had already looked it up. So we were both sort of came together with that and was like, oh, this is what it is. And he's like, yeah, I know this is, so it's really fun to continue to grow with this as well. You can get immersed in it, but it's also fun with the books and the comics and things like that. So you're not always sitting in front of the TV watching it. A lot of the books I do on audiobook. Especially, when we're on the bus or we're flying or something like that, I can put them on and listen to it. And what's really cool for me, and probably for you as well, when I listen to those, a lot of them, if they're in a ship, they'll have the hum of the ship while the person's narrating it. Or and the lightsabers, if they're fighting or if the guns are going off, or, different languages, and instead of just reading it yourself. So I think that sort of makes it come alive a little bit more, especially if you know the characters already. If there's a book on Yoda, I already know what he looks like. They can explain, a 2 foot or, whatever they call it, 2 meter, green with big ears or whatever the case may be. But I already know what he looks like. So for me, that's cool when I listen to these audio books. It's like I'm The Living Force right now. I'm still listening to that. I mean, I think it was like 12 hours or something like that, but they talk about all these Jedi and I already know what they look like, so that helps me listen to the book and put things together. So I'm not trying to figure out, okay, what that person looks like or what that alien looks like. I already know, and maybe I'm missing something because I'm trying to figure out, okay, they just described him, so I already know. So that's how I look at those audiobooks, which I think is pretty cool.
And all just to keep feeding into it for the rest of our lives. More and more and more.
Thank you, George.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Star Wars Jedi Chat. So appreciate everybody listening. And again, Matt, thank you for coming out. It's been a pleasure to have you on here, and we hope to follow you in your Star Wars journey and hear some more. And again, maybe come on afterwards, and talk some more about it once you guys have listened to everything. So
Would love to.
Awesome. Well, until then, thank you for tuning in, Star Wars Jedi Chat. And until the next time, may the Force be with you.